The scout ship, Kalen, drifted through the cold, empty void of the outer rim. Its crew belonged to the Valari Empire, a proud race of bird-like scholars and conquerors. For 300 years, the Valari had believed they were the oldest and most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had built a massive empire, conquered dozens of primitive worlds, and established the Great Galactic Council to rule over all known space. They thought they knew everything about the history of the stars. Commander Valen stood at the center of the bridge, his feathers rustling with impatience. The ship's sensors had picked up a strange energy signal coming from a dead star system. This region of space was known as the Silent Zone. No living species dared to enter it, because it was completely empty of life, filled only with broken planets and asteroid fields. "Status report," Valen commanded, his sharp eyes fixed on the view screen. "We are approaching the third planet, sir," said the science officer, a young Valari named Lyra. Her hands flew across the glowing control panel. "The energy signal is coming from the planet's surface, but it makes no sense. This planet has been frozen and dead for millions of years. There should be no power grids operating here." The Kalen entered the planet's orbit. On the screen, a massive gray world appeared. It was covered in thick layers of ice and dust. But as the ship's cameras zoomed in, the crew gasped. Underneath the ice, there were shapes, massive, geometric shapes that could not be natural. They were the ruins of gigantic cities, stretching across entire continents. "By the ancestors," Valen whispered. "An ancient civilization. Before our empire?" "Sir, the energy signature is a beacon," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "It just activated because our ship crossed the system's outer border. It is a data broadcast. It is repeating a single message in a completely unknown language, using a primitive but incredibly powerful radio frequency." "Can you translate it?" Valen asked, stepping closer to her console. "The ship's main computer is trying to decode it using ancient linguistic patterns," Lyra replied. She waited as the bars on her screen turned green. "It is done. The message is short. It says, 'We were here. We reached the stars. Remember us.'" Valen stared at the screen. The Valari thought they were the first to build cities in space. They thought they were the creators of history. But these ruins were older than the Valari race itself. "Scan for technology," Valen ordered. "We need to know who built this. We need to know how they died." The scout ship descended into the upper atmosphere. The true scale of the ruins became clear. There were metal towers that pierced through the clouds, frozen in time. There were massive shipyards floating in pieces around the moon, large enough to build ships that could swallow the Kalen whole. The sheer size of everything was terrifying. Lyra looked at her readings and frowned. "Sir, I am checking the structural material of these buildings. It is a dense alloy of iron and titanium, reinforced with carbon nanotubes. It is incredibly heavy and durable. The energy required to mine and shape this much metal is beyond our current Imperial production capacity." "That is impossible," Valen snapped. "The Valari Empire commands the resources of 50 systems. Then whoever lived here commanded something much greater," Lyra said softly. They landed the ship in a massive plaza that had been cleared of ice by the thermal heat of the active beacon. Valen, Lyra, and a squad of armed soldiers put on their environmental suits and stepped out into the freezing air. The wind howled through the canyons of metal and stone. They walked toward a large, dome-shaped structure where the beacon was located. Inside, they found a massive chamber filled with glowing crystals and rows of ancient machinery. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal. Floating above the pedestal was a three-dimensional projection of a creature. The creature stood on two legs. It had no feathers, no scales, and no armor. It had smooth skin, hair on its head, and two forward-facing eyes filled with an intense, unbreakable light. It looked fragile compared to the powerful Valari, yet the projection held an aura of absolute confidence. "Is this them?" the soldier captain asked, raising his weapon nervously. "Lower your gun," Valen said. "They have been gone for millions of years." Lyra stepped forward and touched the pedestal. The projection changed. Images began to flash across the room. They saw fields of green, blue oceans, and billions of these two-legged creatures building their first wooden ships, then their first steel cities, and then their first rockets. They saw a history of endless struggle, war, disease, and survival. The creatures called themselves humans. The Valari crew watched in silence as the history of humanity unfolded before them. They saw that humans had faced disasters that would have wiped out the Valari. Their planet had suffered ice ages, asteroid impacts, and brutal global wars. Yet every time they fell, they stood back up. They did not give up. They rebuilt bigger and stronger than before. Then, the images showed humanity leaving their planet. They did not build elegant, floating ships like the Valari. They built massive, blocky, brutal warships made of thick steel and heavy armor. They moved across the galaxy like a storm of industry. They mined entire asteroids in days. They altered the climates of planets to fit their needs. They did not look for harmony with the universe, Valen observed, his voice full of awe and fear. They forced the universe to bend to them. Look at the dates, Commander, Lyra whispered, pointing to the galactic map being displayed. According to these star charts, this human civilization existed 2 billion years ago, before the Valari learned to use fire, before the Galactic Council was even an idea in the minds of the ancient species, before the great empires, there were humans. Suddenly the ground shook. The glowing crystals in the room changed color from soft blue to a deep warning red. The human projection disappeared, replaced by a massive red warning symbol and a loud booming voice that echoed through the chamber. The language was different now, translated automatically by the pedestal's ancient system into the Valari tongue. Warning, the voice said. Intruder signature analyzed. Technological level, suboptimal class, developing species. This archive is now locked to prevent cultural contamination. The automated defense systems are initializing to protect the sector from primitive exploitation. We need to leave now, Valen shouted. They ran out of the dome just as the ground opened up around the plaza. Massive metal pillars rose from the ice. Glowing beams of energy shot into the sky, creating a massive shield network around the entire continent. The ancient human machinery was waking up after billions of years, and its power was overwhelming. The crew scrambled back onto the Kalen and lifted off immediately. As they flew away into space, they looked back at the planet. The ice was melting rapidly as massive automated factories under the surface turned on, glowing with red heat. The entire world was transforming, responding to the presence of outsiders. Back on the bridge, Valen stared at the view screen. The dead planet was no longer dead. It was a sleeping giant that they had accidentally disturbed. Commander, Lyra said, her face pale. I managed to download a small fraction of the archive before it locked us out. It contains a list of coordinates, thousands of them, all across the galaxy, all inside the Silent Zone. Valen looked at the map. The Silent Zone was not an empty wasteland. It was a giant tomb, or perhaps a giant sleeping chamber, belonging to a species that had mastered the galaxy before anyone else was even born. We must return to the capital immediately, Valen said, his voice trembling. The Emperor and the Council must know about this. We thought we were the rulers of this galaxy, but we are just children playing in the ruins of giants. We must pray that they stay asleep. The Great Galactic Council chamber was filled with the voices of 1,000 different alien species. The air was thick with the scent of various atmospheres and the humming sound of translation droids. At the center of the room sat the High Counselors, representing the 3 most powerful empires in the galaxy, the Valari, the Krell, and the Xylos. They were debating trade routes and border disputes, confident in their absolute authority over the universe. Suddenly, the heavy doors of the chamber flew open. Commander Valen stepped inside, followed by Science Officer Lyra. They looked tired, their clothes stained with dust from a distant world. The guards tried to stop them, but Valen pushed past them, holding a glowing data core in his hand. High Counselors, Valen shouted, his voice echoing through the massive hall. I request an emergency hearing. The safety of the entire galaxy is at stake. The Grand Counselor of the Valari, an old and decorated leader named Thule, frowned. Commander Valen, you have abandoned your scouting mission in the Outer Rim. Interrupting a council session is a serious crime. What could possibly justify this madness? We found something in the Silent Zone, Valen said, stepping onto the central presentation platform. We found proof that we are not the first. We found an ancient power that existed long before the Council, before our empires, and before our history even began. The chamber fell silent. Then, a wave of laughter broke out among the delegates. A Krell representative, a massive creature with rocky skin and 4 arms, laughed loudly. An ancient power. The Silent Zone is empty space. There is nothing there but rocks and dead stars. You have been staring into the void for too long, Commander. Valen did not hesitate. He placed the glowing human data core into the central projector. The lights in the chamber dimmed automatically. A massive holographic display filled the air above the counselors. The image of the frozen planet appeared, followed by the terrifying sight of the massive hidden cities beneath the ice. The laughter stopped instantly. The delegates leaned forward, their eyes wide with shock. Then, Lyra stepped forward to explain the data. This is the 3rd planet of a dead solar system. Our scans show that these structures are made of advanced materials that we cannot replicate. The energy output of their dormant systems matches the power of 10 of our modern star bases combined. And this is just one outpost. She pressed a button, and the map of the galaxy appeared. Thousands of red dots flashed across the screen, all located within the forbidden silent zone. Every single one of these dots represents a similar signature, Lyra explained. This was a galactic civilization. They built structures on a scale we cannot imagine. They harvested energy directly from stars, and according to our radiological dating, they ruled this galaxy billions of years ago. The High Counselor of the Xelos, a floating jellyfish-like being that communicated through light patterns, flashed a bright yellow color, indicating deep concern. What is the name of this species? Where did they go? They called themselves humans, Valen replied, and we do not know where they went, but their automated systems are still active. When we landed, the planet began to wake up. Its defense systems identified us as a primitive suboptimal species. The Krell counselor stood up, his heavy fists slamming against his desk. This is absurd. We are the Krell Empire. We have 1 million warships. No ancient ghost story can call us primitive. If these humans are dead, then their technology belongs to the Council. We should send our fleets into the Silent Zone and claim it. No, Lyra warned. You do not understand. Their technology is dangerous. It is built for total dominance. Their weapons are designed to tear apart space and time. If we try to take it by force, we will trigger an automated response that we cannot survive. The girl is afraid of shadows, the Krell leader sneered. The Krell do not fear the dead. Grand Counselor Thule held up his hand, silencing the room. He looked at the holographic image of the human creature. It looked so simple, so physical, yet the data showed a terrifying truth. Commander Valen, you say the planet woke up. Did it attack you? No, sir, Valen said. It ignored us. It put up a shield and locked its archives. It treated us like an annoyance, not a threat. It was as if a giant had brushed away a small insect. That comment struck a painful chord in the hearts of the proud council members. For centuries, they had believed they were the peak of evolution and power. To hear that they were viewed as mere insects by a dead species was a massive blow to their pride. The council immediately ordered a secret investigation. They formed a special task force, led by Valen and Lyra, to study the borders of the Silent Zone. They wanted to know if the humans were truly gone, or if they were just waiting in the dark. Over the next few months, the tension in the galaxy grew. The Krell Empire, driven by greed and pride, secretly sent a small fleet of 50 warships into the Silent Zone. They targeted a massive automated human shipyard floating near a gas giant. They wanted to capture the advanced human ships and use them to overthrow the Council and rule the galaxy. Valen and Lyra monitored the Krell movement from their scout ship, staying safely outside the zone. They are making a terrible mistake, Lyra said, watching the Krell fleet approach the human shipyard on her sensors. The shipyard is waking up. Look at the energy readings. It is drawing power from the nearby star. The Krell warships opened fire on the shipyard, trying to disable its defense grids. Their powerful plasma cannons hit the ancient structure, creating massive explosions of light. For a moment, it looked like the Krell were winning. But then, the human shipyard responded. It did not fire standard lasers or plasma. A single massive beam of dark energy shot out from the center of the station. The beam moved so fast that the Krell ships could not react. It passed through the first 10 Krell warships, instantly dissolving their hulls into basic atoms. The ships did not explode, they simply ceased to exist. The remaining Krell ships tried to turn around and escape, but the shipyard activated a localized gravity well. The space around the Krell fleet twisted, pulling them backward toward the station. One by one, the proud warships of the Krell Empire were crushed into scrap metal by the invisible force of human gravity tech. In less than 3 minutes, the entire Krell fleet was completely destroyed. The shipyard then turned its lights back off, returning to its silent sleeping state. Valen and Lyra watched the empty screen in absolute horror. A fleet that could conquer an entire sector had been wiped out in minutes by a single automated facility that was billions of years old. They didn't even use a crew, Valen whispered, his face white with fear. It was just an automatic security program. Lyra looked at the data, her hands shaking. The universe needs to understand. Before the empires were built, before the Council existed, there were humans, and their weapons are still waiting for anyone foolish enough to wake them up. The destruction of the Krell fleet sent shockwaves through the galactic civilization. The Council immediately placed a total blockade around the Silent Zone, declaring it a forbidden region. No ship was allowed to enter, and no species was allowed to speak of the humans. But rumors spread quickly. Every pirate, trader, and soldier in the galaxy now knew that a terrifying power was sleeping in the dark. For 2 years, there was peace. But that peace was shattered by a new and terrifying threat. From the dark space outside the galaxy, a massive swarm of biomechanical creatures arrived. They were known as the Devourers. They were a mindless, hungry force that traveled from galaxy to galaxy, consuming all organic life and stripping planets of their resources. They had no ships, they were the ships. Massive living monsters made of flesh and metal, stretching for kilometers. The Devourers hit the outer worlds of the Xylos Empire first. Within weeks, 3 highly populated planets were reduced to barren rock. The Xylos fleets fought bravely, but their energy weapons did nothing against the thick, regenerative armor of the organic monsters. The Council called for total mobilization. The Valari, the Krell, and every other species sent their fleets to form a grand alliance. Over 10,000 warships gathered at the border system of Oron, preparing for a final stand against the invading swarm. Commander Valen and Lyra were placed in a command ship, acting as tactical advisors. As they looked at the tactical map, the situation looked hopeless. The Devourer swarm was 10 times larger than the Council fleet. "We cannot win this fight," Valen said grimly during a briefing with the Grand Admirals. "Our weapons are too weak. Their numbers are too great. They will overwhelm our lines in hours." "Then what do you suggest?" Commander Thule asked, his face old and full of despair. "Should we surrender and let them eat our children?" "We must retreat into the silent zone," Lyra suggested suddenly. The room went silent. Every admiral stared at her in shock. "The Devourers are following our energy signatures. If we lead them into the silent zone, the automated human defenses will see them as a threat. The human weapons can destroy them." "Are you insane?" a Krell admiral roared. "The human defenses will destroy us too. We saw what happened to our fleet. The human systems only activate when attacked or when their space is violated by aggressive technology," Lyra argued. "If we enter with our shields down and our weapons offline, showing no hostile intent, the automatic systems might ignore us long enough for the Devourers to trigger the traps." It was a desperate suicidal plan, but there was no other choice. The Devourer swarm entered the system, and the battle began. The Council fleet fought with everything they had, but the organic monsters tore through their lines like a knife through paper. Hundreds of alien ships exploded into flames. Seeing the battle was lost, Admiral Thule gave the order. "All ships, disable your weapons and shields. Retreat into the silent zone. Follow the commander's coordinates." The remaining Council fleet turned and fled into the dark, forbidden space of the humans. The Devourer swarm, sensing a massive amount of food escaping, followed them immediately, their massive jaws snapping and their biocannons firing into the dark. The Council ships flew deep into the human sector, approaching a giant, dark structure that looked like a metallic ring built around a dead star. This was a human Dyson ring, an ancient engineering marvel. As the alien ships approached, they kept their systems completely dark, moving only on basic momentum. The Devourers arrived a moment later, screaming through the void, firing their biological weapons at everything. They landed on the metal ring, trying to tear it apart to find resources. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The Council crews held their breath, praying to their ancestors. Then, the star at the center of the ring suddenly flared to life. It didn't burn with normal orange fire. It turned a brilliant artificial blue. The metal ring began to spin. Massive towers rose from the surface of the ring, glowing with blinding light. But what happened next was something no one expected. The automated voice did not speak through the radio this time. It spoke directly into the minds of every living being in the system. A psychic broadcast that was incredibly heavy and powerful. 3 detected. Extragalactic invasive lifeform. Classification: extinction level threat. Initializing primary defense protocol. From the dark side of the ring, a fleet of ships emerged. But these were not ancient, empty ghost ships. These ships were sleek, beautiful, and glowing with active energy. And on the bridges of those ships, there were living signatures. "Sir," Lyra shouted, looking at her sensor screen in absolute disbelief. "The ships, they have crews. There are millions of living biological signatures on those vessels. They are not extinct. They were just hiding." The human fleet moved forward with terrifying speed. At the front of the fleet was a massive command ship, 5 times larger than any Council dreadnought. It was called the Infinity. The Devourer swarm turned to attack the new threat, launching millions of their smaller biomonsters toward the human ships. The humans did not hesitate. They fired their weapons. Bright beams of white light cut through the void. Where the Council's weapons had failed, the human beams melted through the Devourer armor effortlessly. Entire swarms of the organic monsters were burned to ash in seconds. The human ships moved in perfect, beautiful formation, cutting the enemy lines apart with surgical precision. The Council soldiers watched from their darkened ships, tears running down their faces. They were witnessing a level of power that they didn't know could exist. It was not a battle. It was a cleaning process. The humans were removing a pest from their home. In the middle of the chaos, the Infinity approached the Council command ship. A communication channel opened automatically on Violin's bridge. The screen flickered, and a human male appeared. He wore a simple dark uniform with a silver star on his shoulder. He had gray hair and a tired but incredibly kind smile. He looked exactly like the projection they had seen in the archive 2 years ago. But he was real. He was breathing. "Greetings, travelers," the human officer said in perfect Valari language. "I am Admiral Marcus of the Human Union. We apologize for the dust. We have been sleeping for a very long time, but we always keep an eye on our neighbors." Valen could barely speak. You are alive? Why did you hide from us?" Admiral Marcus sighed, looking out at the burning remains of the Devourer swarm. "When your empires were young, we saw you. We saw your pride, your wars, and your desire for dominance. We realized that if we stayed, you would try to fight us or worship us, and both would ruin your development. So, we withdrew. We created the Silent Zone to give you room to grow. We wanted you to build your own history." The human admiral's expression then turned serious. "But we also promised to protect this galaxy from external horrors. Rest easy, little ones. The humans are here. The monsters cannot hurt you anymore." The revelation that humanity was alive and possessed godlike power changed the galaxy forever. The Devourer threat was completely destroyed within days, hunted down to the last monster by the human fleets. The Council fleet returned to the capital, escorted by 3 human destroyers. These destroyers were small by human standards, but they were still larger than the Council's biggest flagships. The galactic capital was in a state of absolute panic and wonder. Millions of aliens gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky to see the legendary human ships floating silently above the clouds. A grand summit was called in the Council chamber. This time the High Councilors did not sit on their high thrones. They sat at a round table on the floor, waiting humbly for the arrival of the human representatives. The doors opened, and Admiral Marcus walked into the room. He was accompanied by only 2 aides, completely unarmed. He did not wear heavy armor, and he did not bring a squad of soldiers. He walked with the easy confidence of a species that had nothing to fear from anyone in the universe. Grand Counselor Toole stood up and bowed deeply, followed by every delegate in the room. "Welcome, Admiral Marcus. The Galactic Council owes humanity its survival. We do not know how to repay you." Marcus smiled gently, waving his hand for them to sit. "There is no need for repayment, Counselor. We did what any older sibling would do. We protected our family." "Older sibling?" the Krell representative asked, his voice full of mixed fear and respect. "You look so fragile, yet your weapons can destroy stars. We treated your ancient ruins like garbage, and we tried to steal your technology. Why do you not punish us?" "Because you are young," Marcus explained, sitting down at the table. "When humanity first reached the stars, billions of years ago, we were just like you. We were arrogant. We fought terrible wars. We thought we were the center of the universe. We made mistakes that cost us entire planets. We understand your pride because we lived it." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every alien leader. "We do not want to rule you. We do not want your resources. We have mastered the manipulation of matter and energy. We can create anything we need from empty space. We only want peace and cooperation." While the council was relieved by Marcus's words, deep inside their pride was broken. The empires had spent centuries building their power, believing they were the masters of destiny. Now, they had to accept that they were living under the shadow of an ancient guardian that could wipe them out with a single thought, even if that guardian was kind. But peace did not last long. A new crisis emerged, not from outside the galaxy, but from within the council itself. A radical faction of the Krell Empire, furious about their loss of status and power, refused to accept human superiority. They believed that the human claim of being billions of years old was a lie, a trick designed to make the council weak. Led by a rogue warlord named Malachor, they secretly activated an ancient, forbidden superweapon that the Krell had found in a deep space anomaly decades ago. It was a void bomb, a device designed to trigger a chain reaction that would collapse a star into a black hole, destroying an entire solar system. Malachor's fleet seized control of the Oron system, a vital trade hub where millions of innocent civilians lived. He sent a broadcast to the entire galaxy, demanding that the humans leave the galaxy immediately and turn over all their technology to the Krell, or he would detonate the bomb and destroy the system. In the council chamber, the news caused absolute chaos. "The Oron system has 20 billion lives," Thule screamed. "Malachor is insane. He will destroy us all." Admiral Marcus remained perfectly calm. He stood up from the table and looked at the holographic screen showing Malachor's fleet. "Warlord Malachor," Marcus said into the communication system, "you are making a mistake that your species cannot afford. Turn off the weapon and surrender." On the screen, Malachor laughed, his rocky face twisting in anger. You do not scare me, human. You claim to be gods, but you are just flesh and blood. If you step into this system, I will press the button, and 20 billion people will die with me. Marcus did not argue. He looked at Valen and Lyra, who were standing nearby. Would you like to see how humanity handles a temper tantrum? Marcus asked quietly. Before Valen could answer, Marcus tapped a small device on his wrist. Infinity, activate the chronostatic field in the Oron system. Target the weapon and the hostile fleet. In the Oron system, Malachor stood on his bridge, his hand hovering over the detonation button. I will show them the power of the Krell, he shouted, slamming his hand down onto the button. Nothing happened. Malachor blinked, looking at his console. He tried to move his arm again, but he realized he couldn't. He looked out the view screen and gasped. The entire universe had stopped moving. The plasma fires burning in space were frozen in time. The dust floating in the air was completely still. The countdown timer on the void bomb was stuck at 0:01. The humans had not just used a weapon. They had stopped time itself in a localized area around the enemy fleet. A human strike team, moving through the frozen time field using advanced phase suits, walked right onto Malachor's bridge. They calmly disconnected the void bomb, disarmed the Krell soldiers, and placed Malachor in stasis handcuffs. 2 minutes later, Marcus tapped his wrist again. Time resumed in the Oron system. Malachor suddenly found himself on the floor of his bridge, completely disarmed, with human soldiers standing over him. His fleet was surrounded by human warships that hadn't been there a second ago. The void bomb was gone, replaced by a simple human flag. The entire event was broadcast live to the council chamber. The alien leaders stood in stunned, absolute silence. They had seen weapons of destruction before, but they had never seen a species that could control time and space like clay. Marcus looked at the Krell representatives in the room. Your warlord has been neutralized. No civilian was harmed. The weapon has been dismantled. He walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back at Thule. We told you before. Before your empires, before your council, we were here. We have seen every weapon, every war, and every strategy. Do not try to fight us. We are very good at keeping the peace. The Grand Galactic Council entered a new era. It was no longer a council of rulers, but a council of students. The alien species realized that their understanding of science, philosophy, and power was primitive compared to the humans. They stopped fighting among themselves. The borders between empires became meaningless as everyone sought to learn from the ancient guardians. Commander Valen and Lyra were appointed as the official galactic ambassadors to humanity. They spent their days on the Infinity, learning about human history, culture, and technology. They discovered that humans did not live in a single place. The human union spanned across multiple dimensions and galaxies, yet they always kept a small part of their heart attached to the Milky Way, their birthplace. One evening, Valen and Lyra sat with Admiral Marcus on an open-air observation deck on the Infinity. Below them, the beautiful blue and green world of Earth was visible. The humans had fully restored their original home, turning it into a beautiful paradise of nature and advanced science. It is beautiful, Lyra said, looking down at the oceans of Earth. It is hard to believe that this small planet produced a species that holds the fate of the galaxy in its hands. Every great thing starts small, Lyra, Marcus said, sipping a warm beverage. Millions of years ago, we were just hunters looking up at the stars, wondering if we were alone. We were afraid of the dark. And now you rule the dark, Valen observed. We do not rule it, Marcus corrected gently. We just understand it. The universe is a dangerous place, Valen. There are entities out there, in the deep space between galaxies, that are older than time itself. Horrors that make the devourers look like pets. That is the real reason we stayed hidden, and that is the real reason we keep our weapons sharp. Valen felt a cold shiver run down his spine. There are worse things out there. Yes, Marcus nodded, but you do not need to worry about them. That is our burden to bear. We have been fighting those horrors in the dark for 1 billion years, so that young species like yours can live in the light, oblivious to the terrors of the deep universe. The true nature of the Silent Zone finally became clear to the Council. It was not just an archive or a tomb. It was a massive shield wall, a fortress line built by humanity to protect the inner galaxy from the true monsters of the cosmos. The empty space was filled with hidden sentry stations, gravity traps, and planetary fortresses designed to stop extra-dimensional invasions. The Council realized that their entire existence was a gift from humanity. Every empire that had risen, every war they had fought, every piece of art they had created, had happened only because the humans were standing guard at the edge of the galaxy, taking the blows from the terrifying outside world. As the years passed, the relationship between humans and the alien species grew stronger. The humans did not give away their advanced weapons, but they taught the Council how to clean their planets, how to cure diseases, and how to travel faster without damaging the fabric of space. The proud Valari Empire became a race of historians, documenting the true history of the galaxy under human guidance. The Krell became builders, helping to construct new, safe trading stations. The Xylos used their unique abilities to create art that integrated both alien and human concepts. A great monument was built at the center of the galactic capital. It was a massive statue made of the unbreakable human alloy. It depicted a human hand holding up a small, fragile star representing the galactic species. Beneath the statue, an inscription was carved in every known language of the galaxy. The inscription read, "To the Guardians in the Dark. Before the empires were born, before the council was formed, before the stars grew old, there were humans. And because they stood, we live." Valen stood before the monument on the day of its dedication, looking up at the metal hand. Beside him stood Lyra, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "We were so proud," Valen whispered, remembering the day they had first entered the Silent Zone. "We thought we were the masters of the universe." "It is a good thing we were wrong," Lyra replied with a smile. "The universe is too big to face alone. It is nice to know we have an older brother looking out for us." High above the capital city, the silver ships of the human fleet flashed their lights in acknowledgement of the monument. Before slipping silently back into the dark void, they returned to their endless watch, standing guard at the edge of the stars, ensuring that the peace they had built would last for eternity. The aliens had realized too late, but they had realized the truth. Humanity was not just a species, they were the eternal soul of the galaxy.